To item 17, a public hearing to receive public comments on the proposed Reimagine Metro Phase 2 service proposals for implementation in June and September 2024.
What a good segue. Now, time for the main event, right? John Urgo, Planning and Development Director. It's great to be back again with this item. So while Daniel Costantino from Jarrett Walker and Associates is pulling up his slides, there he is. I'll just quickly remind us how we all got here. So we came in February and presented the draft Phase 2 Reimagine Metro plan to you all. We're going to hold a public hearing today and ask you to approve what really amounts to a 50% increase in service, which is really exciting and kind of astounding to be here. When we began this process 15 months ago, this was kind of a dream. We thought, well, we'll do a plan for the resources we have, and we'll do a dream plan for what we would implement if we had additional resources. And here we are actually implementing the dream plan. We took that plan out to the public for the last 2 months. What you'll see is a little bit different from what we presented in February based on the feedback that we received. But I will just kick it off to Daniel if he's ready to present slides.
Hi, yes, I'm ready. Let me just pull up the screen share. And all right, are you all seeing this slide, Reimagine Metro?
We are.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks, John. Thanks for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to speak with this board of directors again today. So we've gone over this a few times, but just a brief reminder for anyone who might be online and isn't aware of this. Reimagine Metro is this process that we've been working on for the last 15 months, where we've been reviewing in depth where buses go, how often they go there, and whether that should change. And we did come to the conclusion that some of that should change. Some of that was implemented in phase 1, which started in December and is recently kind of finished implementing in March. And really, as we've done all this work, we've had a few key goals in mind throughout. There's been this strong sort of directing line of increasing the amount of service provided as much as is possible with the resources at hand. About making transit more reliable, about making sure that the transit lines reflect where people are actually going and how they're traveling in the post-COVID world. But most importantly, making sure that we design and put out service that is useful and attractive for many more people's trips than has been the case for several years. So again, we've been working on this since late 2022. We had the opportunity to analyze all the existing service in detail. We've conducted several rounds of outreach, 2 during the course of the project. There was also a survey that happened before we started the project. And then, of course, the one that happened just recently now. As of March 2024, phase 1 has been implemented. And so since your service change on March 14th, this map that you're seeing here describes basically the service that's out there right now. And so this is a lot like what was there in December, but there have been a few recent service additions. There's later evening service on Route 2, which connects Santa Cruz to Watsonville via Capitola Mall, Cabrillo College, and Main Street. There's more evening service on Route 3B, serving parts of Live Oak. There's more later evening service on Route 73, which replaces the old Route 71 through parts of rural Freedom. More express trips on Route 90X, which is the direct service from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. It's basically nonstop coming out of Watsonville all the way to SoCal Avenue in Santa Cruz. More peak hour trips on Route 73. So service every 30 minutes at peak on Route 73. A new Route 78 in Watsonville, going out and serving West Beach, Ohlone Parkway, and the new County Social Services Office at Westridge as well, and a small realignment of Route 72, where since Route 78 is now kind of the direct connection from downtown Watsonville to the hospital, Route 72 can now join Route 75, providing more frequent, more reliable service on Green Valley Road. So that's where we're at right now. And of course, the next step is to go into phase 2. So this phase 2 are things that will happen between now and September. I think We're not quite yet sure exactly how much happens in June and how much happens in September. That's work that needs to happen in the next month or two. But overall, it's a 50% increase in service, more or less. And we developed a draft network to show what that service increase might look like. And then we presented that plan to the public. And having now presented that plan and received a range of feedback, we've made some revisions and we're proposing this revised plan to you for your approval. So as a reminder, here was the draft proposal. So this is what we put out to the public. The draft proposal, as you can see, biggest key thing to notice is that on the last map, so on all these maps, by the way, the color of a line tells you how often the bus comes. So if the line is red, it means it's a frequent bus route. It's service every 15 minutes or better. If it's dark blue, it's a bus that comes every half hour. And if it's light blue, it comes only about once an hour. And if it's kind of a thin orangey line, it means it comes some of the time. So if you compare these two maps, the biggest single difference is how much more red there is on these two maps. And you can see that there's frequent service every 15 minutes or better in many, many more areas. That's the key part of this proposal. So you see new service every 15 minutes in almost all of Live Oak, in Soquel, in parts of Aptos, in about half of Watsonville. So a lot more areas with that frequent service. Also, all-day service on Route 90X. Right now, Route 90X, the express from Watsonville to Santa Cruz, operates at peak hours only. That would increase to be all-day service 7 days a week. Also, a very important thing that we really wanted to get the public's input on in terms of how we put the frequent service out there. There's been a strong desire for a long time to create more east-west connections in Santa Cruz between the West Side and UCSC and between all the residential areas in East Santa Cruz and Live Oak. So this proposal put out a way to make that happen, where you would have the current routes 18 and 19 serving West Santa Cruz would be merged with routes 1 and 2, the 18 becoming part of Route 1, and the 19 becoming part of Route 2. And that in turn meant that because the lines would become very, very long, they would need to get split at Cabrillo College. So essentially Route 1, instead of being Watsonville to Santa Cruz, would be Cabrillo College to UC Santa Cruz. And Route 2, instead of being Watsonville to Santa Cruz, would be Cabrillo College to UC Santa Cruz. And in exchange, the routes 1 and 2 that are in Watsonville right now would become routes 61 and 62. 61 would go to every 15 minutes, just like Route 1, and there'd be Route 90X with the all-day direct service. So that was something that we thought was overall an improvement and addressed a lot of things that we'd heard, but that we also understood had some impacts and was important to present to the public as something to consider and let us know whether that felt good and useful and acceptable. So why we did this in general, I mean, really what we've heard over and over and over from the public in this process, from even before starting this process, was that people want more frequency. And that makes sense because when the bus comes more often, it's easier to use. It's more likely that it'll come soon if you show up at a random time. If a trip misses for some reason, another one is coming not far behind it. So for many, many reasons, frequent service is simply easier to use. We also heard that people wanted better weekend and evening service. We've heard a strong desire for more express service on highways, reflecting the large number of very long trips that people have to make, partly due to your housing prices and what that means about people needing to go up to the Bay Area or living in Watsonville and working in Santa Cruz or San Jose, et cetera. And I've already mentioned the better east-west connections in Santa Cruz as a thing that's desired. So this right here is a chart from one of our earlier phases of outreach that shows kind of how people were ranking the different kinds of improvements that they'd like to see if more funding were available, which it now appears that it is. And so what you can see is people want all of these things and frequency really comes out ahead by far. So these percentages are the number of people who ranked the priority listed on the left as number 1, 2, and 3 among this list. And so you can see that over half of people who responded in that survey were, very clearly going in the direction of high frequency. And these others are desired, but frequency is number 1, and that's kind of why we prioritized it. So as a result, in that draft proposal, you'd get about 100,000 people and 40,000 jobs within a half-mile walk of service every 15 minutes, 7 days a week, and every 30 minutes, even after 9 p.m. So that's great. But then, we also wanted to measure the impact of this and make sure that, okay, are we really making service more useful? And so we did an access analysis that I presented to you in more detail a month ago, but that basically shows that, we're helping people get to more places in the same amount of time, get to far more places as we've gone through this process. If you look at these charts, they're bar charts that show how many jobs someone could reach within a certain amount of time. So if you focus on the red bar, that's jobs you could reach within 45 minutes using just public transit and your own 2 feet, and assuming an average walking speed. So this includes walking time, it includes the time people have to wait for the bus, it includes transfer time, everything. So this is really door to door. It's comparable as a travel time to what people do on other modes, like if they're in your car or biking or whatever. And basically what we did is we have designed these services to maximize how much change we are showing overall on average on these bars. So people can get to more jobs, which means more places in general, within 45 minutes, within 60 minutes, within any amount of time. You just measure it at those horizons. So this proposal as a whole that we had put out there relies on a few things that are important to know. One of them is the new state funding, which I believe to be largely TERSIP, and John can provide perhaps more details about that. It's also, that's really kind of the key number one thing. Other key thing was that you can't put out this kind of extra service without a lot more drivers than you've had for the last few years. So it was on the assumption that the hiring drive that's been going on would continue being successful, and you'd reach a roster of 230, 240 drivers within the year. It's also assumed, and this is really important to note, a couple things about what's happening at UCSC. And there's ongoing discussions with UCSC. It's kind of, Metro's not in a position to know exactly what's going to happen, but we know that there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of things that need to happen, and we wanted to present kind of the best possible thing. And so the two things that really matter about UCSC in this draft proposal are that there's an assumption that there is a place at UCSC where a bus can stop, take a break, the driver can take a break, use the facilities, and the bus can turn around. And that's really important because it is the key to being able to provide reliable east-west service in Santa Cruz. Without that, you cannot do that because when a bus comes into UCSC on the loop right now, you don't know how long it's going to take before that bus goes out. There's tons and tons of demand at UCSC, both people arriving on campus, people traveling through campus, and people leaving campus. All three groups are exchanging at every stop for every bus that Metro runs through there right now. So as a result, when you have a bus that tries to go east-west, like Route 3 has been doing for the last few months, that can be problematic. You get big reliability issues. So this layover was a really key assumption. The other thing that happens is that once you have this layover, you're running Metro buses for longer on campus than you were previously. It's shorter one way because you're dealing with fewer types of trips, but it also means that the bus comes in one way, comes back out one way. And in a way that will make service more convenient and more legible for a lot of purposes, but it also means more hours of service, which means more cost. So there's an assumption built into this that there would be a UCSC layover and that UCSC would come to the table with more funding to increase that campus-oriented service, the number of service hours that are on campus. And we didn't know where that conversation was going to land, but we wanted to present what seemed like the best reasonable outcome. And that was put out there in the public meetings about this. And so anyway, I'll keep on going, but I just want you to be aware of that assumption. So we had a whole public outreach process for this. There were various tools that we used to get feedback. We had a project website that was at scmtd.com/reimagine metro with all of the project information, report presentations, etc., and links to the online survey. There was also the Metro's website also featured information about the project. That survey that I just mentioned, there was a bilingual online survey offered in English and Spanish. It was open for about a month. We got about 500 responses on that from people from all walks of life, as I'll show you in a minute. We also had 3 public meetings. They were held on the week of your last board meeting, so the week preceding February 23rd. During that week, we had 3 different meetings. 2 were in Watsonville, 1 was in Santa Cruz. They were all offered both online and in person. And of course, I presented to you all last month at the board meeting, and I'm presenting to you now at the beginning of this public hearing. It's great to have meetings and a survey and all that, but of course, you can't do that in a vacuum. People need to have some way to know that it's happening and to decide whether they're interested in providing input. So we had a bunch of promotional tools that were put out there to make sure that people heard about it. If people wanted to hear about it or might be interested, they could. You can never reach everyone, but we tried to go out as wide as we could. And so Metro put out a news release, produced some flyers that were on buses. There were social media calls. There were emails to Metro's regular email lists, as well as to everyone who we'd heard from in any of the prior rounds of outreach and had provided contact information. There were the 2 websites that I mentioned previously, both on Metro's website and the project-specific website. And also the people from AMA on our team, who are sub-consultants to Jarrett Walker and Associates, actually called all of the stakeholder organizations that we'd held focus groups with in the prior rounds of outreach and said, hey, this is happening. The meetings are going to happen here. There's an online survey here. Let your people know. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help you and any information you need. So all that happened. I think I've already briefly described the public outreach meetings, but again, they were hybrid meetings available online and in person, 2 in Watsonville, 1 in Santa Cruz. The Watsonville meetings, actually, we made a point of holding 1 in kind of the early evening time and 1 in the middle of the day so that it would be open to kind of as wide a range of people's schedules as may be possible. And I presented in those remotely. John and other Metro staff were there in person, answered some questions, and had, I believe, some follow-up conversations with the people who showed up in person afterwards. And the presentations were available and were given in both English and Spanish, and we had some meetings where some Spanish speakers showed up. So that we were able to kind of cover as many bases as possible with that. In terms of presenting the general quality of the feedback, probably the online survey gives us the biggest picture. So I'm going to present you the results of that in a little bit more detail. We had 508 responses in total. That compares to about 900 responses when we went out a little bit less than a year ago about the alternatives for phase 1. That's a pretty standard thing that happens as you go through a project and things happen. People think, didn't this happen already? So you have to work a little harder to get the same levels of engagement. But we still got several hundred people letting us know what they thought. We know that we got a really wide base of respondents. About 70% of people who responded are people who ride Metro at least a few times a month, and 25% are people who ride every day. We got, a wide range of kind of people's incomes and abilities and their stages of life. About half of the people from low-income households, about half of people don't have a car available to them. 30% people of color, about a third of respondents were students at UCSC or Cabrillo. So none of these reflect exactly the demographics of Santa Cruz County, but the point is that because we got these kind of high double-digit percentages of people in all these different categories, we can be relatively certain that we've reached a pretty broad range of people. I also want to say before I show you the results that we got that in the time that some of the earlier discussions of this meeting were happening, I went through these results again, and the results I'm going to show you are averages for everyone who responded, but in every single one of these categories, the results we got are within 5 to 7% of the average results. So no one category of these expressed like radically different opinions from everyone else. We have kind of even though we can't claim an exact statistic representation of your population, we have a pretty reliable picture of whether the feeling's generally positive, generally negative, or in the middle. So we asked a few questions. The first one we asked was whether people had ridden the bus since December and how they felt about those changes. And so we got about 350 people who answered that they had ridden the bus since December. And we got more favorable than unfavorable reviews for things that had happened since December. I would say this is not a slam dunk. But on the other hand, it's important to remember that people are generally a lot more motivated to provide feedback when it's negative than when it's positive. So the fact that we have kind of a slight preponderance of favorable opinions is a generally good sign. I think there's also a lot of kind of more long-form comments that we got that were perhaps not so much directly related to with the exact lines and services that are being provided, but with a lot of the difficulties in understanding how much things are changing, because there was both the regular service change in December and the move of transit centers in downtown Santa Cruz in February. And it's simply difficult to manage that level of change in that short of a period of time. And so it's not surprising that a lot of people are still getting used to this. I think there's definitely still work to be done on Metro's end, but overall, we think we're getting a generally slightly favorable assessment on the things that have happened so far. In terms of the plan that we're proposing for September, however, we got much more clearly favorable opinions. So of the people who answered whether the draft plan would make transit more useful for themselves, we got about 60% of respondents telling us, yes, it would, and only about 15% of people telling us, no, it wouldn't, with the remainder kind of either having neutral opinions or not being sure. So we have kind of a net plus 50% favorability on whether the draft plan would be more useful personally to the people who are responding. When we ask people the same question, but about the whole community, whether would this plan make transit better for the whole community, we got even more favorable responses, with almost 70% of people telling us that it would slightly or definitely make transit better for the community as a whole, and only 12% giving us an unfavorable response on that, either they would make it slightly or much worse. So we got mostly positive responses. Those are important to nuance with kind of a lot of the kind of more detailed feedback that we got, both on what's happened since December and on things that are in the plan. Generally, a number of positive comments that really focused on improved frequency. So that's very consistent with everything we've heard so far. We did hear a lot about a few of the other things that are written here. Reliability issues. Those are issues that, are experienced on service, kind of network-wide, but are especially severe on UCSC routes for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and particularly, as I mentioned earlier, on Route 3, which is the one route doing east-west service right now, and it's doing that east-west service while doing the full loop around UCSC and not turning around, which means that your outbound buses on Route 3, when they're coming back out of UCSC, going to Capitola Mall, they often leave UCSC rather late. And as a result, you have just that service doesn't run as reliably as it should. We also heard somewhat from people from the San Lorenzo Valley. I guess there are some improvements for San Lorenzo Valley in this plan, in particular in the draft plan, particularly Route 35, which would be upgraded on weekends to have the same level of services on weekdays. I think there is some desire for there to be more improvement in the San Lorenzo Valley, given the improvements in other areas. And some of that concern about the San Lorenzo Valley wasn't about Route 35, but it was about Route 17 and kind of the uncertainty in the draft plan about how many Route 17 trips would go through Scotts Valley, where there's significant park and ride usage for trips to and from San Jose. So that was something we heard. We also, in the detailed comments, heard from a number of people in South County, about difficulties reaching Capitola Mall and Dominican Hospital, so those big mid-county destinations, and how some of the service changes that had happened since December had required new transfers to get to there. And some of those transfers are between routes that aren't very frequent. So there's definitely some concern about that we wanted to address. Also at UCS, just there and how that is the fastest possible path from downtown to UCSC, and how much service is available specifically on Bay Street, where the most buses tend to get overcrowded. And so a lot of people basically, as a result of that, are telling us they really wanted Route 15 back because that's the route that took Laurel and Bay up to UCSC. We also heard some things that are not really related to the network design, but that are important to a lot of people and that you should be aware of as board members. First of all, highlighted a lot of concern, lots of people telling us, why isn't there Metro service on holidays? It's not something that, we're resolving in the study for this project, but it's something that, Metro could look at. Nothing about this plan prevents you from having service on holidays. If you're not doing it, it's for other reasons. They may be good, I don't know, but people want to know. So you should be aware of that. As was mentioned previously in this meeting by a lot of the public commenters, a lot of concern about infrastructure issues, particularly things relating to bus stops and also access to and from those bus stops. Some concern that I mentioned earlier on the kind of difficulty with navigating multiple rounds of service changes. Also, a little bit about reliability of real-time information, which I know is something Metro's working on. We did hear, though, also a lot of positive comments about Metro drivers and how helpful they have been in this process as people navigate the multiple changes, and I wanted to highlight that. There's really a lot of positive feeling about that. So, taking all that into account, we have devised some revised recommendation that we're taking to you basically for your discussion approval today, at your discretion, of course. So just a reminder, when we put out the draft plan for phase 2, it relied on these 4 things. That state funding from the TIRSIP, the new driver hiring, and the layover, and some new layover there, and that Metro can't or what Metro could and I want to be clear so that you know kind that includes to do around, I guess, the basic dream, which is that sort of 50% increase in service without new resources from UCSC. Both scenarios, they have a lot in common. They both took into account a lot of the same things we heard from the public. One thing that's important to note, that Route 1 split at Cabrillo College, Route 1 via Soquel between Santa Cruz and Watsonville, that would go away in both scenarios. Route 1 would go from downtown Santa Cruz through Soquel Drive, Cabrillo College, Highway 1, and to Airport and Freedom Boulevard in Watsonville. So that was important. It's partly a response to the reliability concern about Route 18 and Route 1, and it's also partly kind of keeping those direct trips as much as possible kind of across the county. Route 18 is also the longest path from downtown Santa Cruz to, of the frequent routes from downtown Santa Cruz to UCSC, so it was kind of the least valuable of those 3 routes. Not that it wasn't valuable, just it was the one that provided the least new benefit. Big thing, significantly more service on Route 17 than in the draft proposal. So the draft proposal had hourly direct service from Santa Cruz to San Jose and a few trips, basically through Scotts Valley in addition to that. The proposal we're bringing to you today has basically service every 30 minutes from Santa Cruz to San Jose and half of those trips, so once an hour through Scotts Valley. As part of what I was telling you about Route 1 and also some changes made on Route 2, 62, and 73, we've tried to maximize the amount of direct service in both scenarios between Watsonville and Santa Cruz and those key mid-county destinations, Capitola Mall and Dominican Hospital. I would add to that for Watsonville, Cabrillo College, which is also directly accessible from pretty much every route coming out. And Route 15 has been added back. And also there was some feedback we got about Route 20, which was proposed to be just get to the base of campus and then you transfer to other routes, and that's no longer the case in what's being proposed today. So I've said all that. That's a lot of words describing a lot of very detailed things, so appreciate your patience with it. Here's what this looks like on a map. So scenario A, the dream of the dream, the extra dream. So this is including UCSC layover and funding. So on this one, key things to note, you have that two-way service at UCSC and the layover. We have UCSC East Side direct service maintained on routes 2, so via Bay Street into downtown Santa Cruz, and then out Soquel Avenue and Capitola Road to Capitola Mall, and on Route 3, which also starts at UCSC and ends up at Capitola Mall, but serves High Street and Broadway and splits to serve kind of different areas around Seabright and Twin Lakes and parts of Live Oak before joining back again around Pleasure Point. So that UCSC East Side direct service is in this concept. And you can see compared to the draft proposal, routes 62 and 73, instead of ending at Cabrillo College, they're both extended to Capitola Mall. One of them via 41st, the other one via Capitola Village. Detail of this through Capitola Avenue will change based on what I heard earlier today, but that's the idea. And so we're able to basically, with that assumption, get all of the benefits that were in the draft plan. And in addition to that, extra service on Route 17 and one lost east-west direct connection, but one kind of regained or maintained direct connection between downtown Santa Cruz and Watsonville. So here's kind of the base dream. Here's what Metro can control, can make happen within your control all the way. So scenario B, UCSC, the relationship with UCSC kind of stays what it is, which is your basic budget assumption as well, as reported earlier. So to make that happen and to maintain service reliability and continue working towards improving it, there's one key consequence, which is that as long as you're running all these one-way loops around UCSC, that east-west service is going to have to break at downtown Santa Cruz, because otherwise you're just making the east side suffer the reliability consequences of the extremely high demand and multiple trip types happening simultaneously at UC Santa Cruz. So as a result, what that means compared to today, Route 3, which is currently a through route from Capitola Mall to UCSC, but isn't running reliably, would split. It would still double in service on the east side, but Route 10 would go back to being its own route on High Street. And then Route 2, which would not merge with Route 19. Route 19 would stay its own thing. And Route 2, as long as this is the case, would continue being a direct route, a complete route. It's not that direct, it's very long, but from Santa Cruz all the way to Watsonville via Capitola Mall. It wouldn't split into 2 and 62. It'd stay every 30 minutes at this time, and that's scenario B. So at this time, staff recommendation would be that the board approve scenario B as the preferred service alternative. So basically, because it's what you know you can do, and because we've spent a lot of time thinking about it and incorporating all the public input we've had into it. And that's kind of pending future discussions and seeing where those go, and seeing how UCSC reacts to scenario A and what's needed to make that happen. So if the board approves this recommendation, then the staff and project team are going to move on to the next step, which is developing schedules and preparing for service changes. Starting as soon as June, although I don't know if everything would happen in June, I'm assuming there'd be a staggered implementation. That's for John to determine. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to all this today. I will let you move on to the next step. I assume there's some public comment before we go to board discussion. Thanks again. And if anyone needs me to move back to any of this and provide anything in more detail, I'm happy to at any time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.